The clock struck 7, and the village of Chipping Cleghorn was eerily quiet, save for the rustle of evening papers being delivered to doorsteps. In the dim glow of a single lamp, Ellen Ward Grayson opened her copy of the Chipping Cleghorn Gazette and froze. Nestled among the usual ads for bake sales and lost cats was a peculiar notice. A murder is announced and will take place on Friday, October 29th at Little Paddocks. At 6:30 p.m. friends, please accept this, the only intimation. Her hands trembled. Was it a prank, a game, or something far darker? The words seemed to pulse with menace, as if the paper itself knew a secret it couldn't wait to spill. By morning, the entire village was buzzing with curiosity and dread, unaware that an unassuming elderly spinster, Miss Jane Marple, was already piecing together the clues to a mystery that would unravel their quaint little world. Welcome to Miss Marple's case of a murder announced, where nothing is as innocent as it seems, and every smile hides a shadow. Stick with us as we dive into this chilling tale. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more gripping mysteries. Chipping Cleghorn was the kind of village where secrets were as common as daisies in a meadow, yet everyone pretended they didn't exist. The announcement in the Gazette shattered that pretense like a stone through a stained glass window. By mid-morning, the news had spread from the post office to the butcher's shop, from the tea room to the churchyard. Neighbors clustered in doorways, their voices hushed but urgent, dissecting the cryptic notice. A murder is announced. The words felt like a dare, a challenge to the village's cozy routine. Who could have placed such a macabre advertisement? Was it a prank by some bored youth, or had a darker force crept into their midst? At the vicarage, Miss Jane Marple, a guest of the vicar's wife, Mrs. Dora Harmon, listened to the gossip with her usual quiet attentiveness. Her knitting needles clicked rhythmically, a counterpoint to the nervous chatter around her. Miss Marple, with her soft white curls and unassuming demeanor, was often underestimated, but her mind was a steel trap for the smallest details others overlooked. When Mrs. Harmon, a bubbly woman with a penchant for exaggeration, thrust the Gazette under her nose, Miss Marple's pale blue eyes sharpened. This was no ordinary village scandal. Let's paint the picture of Chipping Cleghorn for you. Imagine a postcard-perfect English village, ivy-clad cottages, a winding lane leading to a market square, and a church tower that loomed over it all, its clock chimming with relentless cheer. The villagers prided themselves on their community spirit weekly bridge games, annual flower shows, and a shared suspicion of outsiders. But the announcement had cracked that façade, exposing the fault lines beneath. At the heart of the mystery was Little Paddocks, the home of Letitia Blacklock, a woman in her late 50s with a knack for making everyone feel welcome. Her cottage, with its rose-covered trellis and polished brass knocker, was the envy of the village. Yet, Letitia's reaction to the notice was puzzling. When neighbors called to express their concern, she laughed it off, calling it a silly bit of nonsense and inviting them to Little Paddocks at 6:30 p.m. on Friday for drinks and, presumably, to see what happened. Her nonchalance was almost perfect, Miss Marple thought, stirring her tea. Was Letitia truly unconcerned, or was she hiding a fear she didn't dare voice? Little Paddocks wasn't just a house, it was a microcosm of intrigue. Living with Letitia was an eclectic cast of characters, each one a potential piece in Miss Marple's puzzle. There was Dora Bunner, Letitia's old school friend, a fluttery woman whose scatterbrained chatter masked a fiercely loyal heart. Then there were Patrick and Julia Simmons, Letitia's young cousins, who had arrived from London with their sharp wit and city polish. The housekeeper, Mitzi, a refugee from Eastern Europe, was prone to dramatic outbursts and a fierce protectiveness over the household. And finally, Philippa Hames, a reserved young widow who worked at a nearby estate, rented a room at Little Paddocks and kept to herself. Miss Marple, sipping her tea at the vicarage, catalogued each one in her mind. She knew from experience that motives for murder often hid in plain sight love, greed, revenge, or fear. The announcement's specificity gnawed at her. Why 6:30 p.m.? Why Little Paddocks, and why advertise a crime at all? As Friday loomed, the village buzzed with a mix of curiosity and dread. Some, like the nosy Mrs. Swettenham, saw the announcement as an invitation to a macabre parlour game and eagerly RSVP'd. Others, like Colonel Easterbrook, a retired military man with a penchant for conspiracy theories, muttered about foul play and checked the locks on his doors. Miss Marple, however, was already at work, her mind sifting through the village's history. She learned from Mrs. Harmon that Letitia had inherited a substantial fortune from Randall Godler, a financier who died years ago. His will, it seemed, had left Letitia comfortable, but also tied her to a complex web of family ties and old promises. Could the money be the key? Miss Marple's needles paused as she considered the possibilities. A public announcement of murder was bold, almost theatrical. It suggested someone wanted an audience or perhaps a distraction. The villagers' excitement was tinged with unease. What if the announcement wasn't a joke? What if someone did die at Little Paddocks? Miss Marple's thoughts kept circling. Back to Letitia. Her calm demeanour felt like a mask, and Miss Marple was determined to see what lay beneath it. She recalled a similar case in St. Mary Mead, where a seemingly trivial rumour had led to a deadly betrayal. People are so predictable, she murmured to herself, and yet so surprising, as the sun set over Chipping Cleghorn, casting long shadows across the village green. The stage was set for a night that would change everything. Miss Marple tucked her knitting into her bag and prepared to attend the gathering at Little Paddocks. She had a feeling the real mystery was only just beginning. So, what's going on here? Is the announcement a harmless prank, a cunning threat, or something even more twisted? Miss Marple's already on the case, and you'll want to stick around to see what she uncovers. In the next chapter, we'll step inside Little Paddocks, where the guests arrive, the lights flicker, and the line between game and danger blurs. What do you think the announcement means? Drop your theories in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more suspenseful twists. Stay tuned, this mystery's only getting started. As the clock ticked closer to 6:30 p.m. on Friday, October 29th, the air in Chipping Cleghorn grew thick with anticipation, like the hush before a storm. Little Paddocks, bathed in the golden glow of autumn dusk, looked deceptively serene, its windows twinkling as if inviting the curious and the brave inside. Letitia Blacklock played the perfect hostess, arranging sherry glasses and trays of biscuits with a smile that seemed just a touch too bright. The village had turned out in force, drawn by the bizarre announcement in the Gazette. Neighbours who hadn't visited in months now crowded the drawing room, their laughter brittle, their eyes darting. Was this a game, as Letitia insisted, or had they all walked into a trap? Miss Jane Marple, seated in a corner with her knitting, observed the scene with quiet intensity, her unassuming presence white hair neatly pinned. Cardigans slightly frayed made her blend into the wallpaper, but her mind was as sharp as ever, cataloguing every glance, every nervous gesture. The stage was set, and Miss Marple knew that, in a village like this, the smallest slip could unravel a deadly secret. Let's step into Little Paddocks for a moment. Picture a cozy, slightly cluttered drawing room with chintz curtains, a crackling fire, and a sideboard groaning under the weight of crystal decanters and homemade scones. The guests, a mix of Chipping Cleghorn's finest, milled about with forced cheer. There was Mrs. Swettenham, her eyes gleaming with gossip-hungry excitement, and her son Edmund, a bookish young man who seemed more interested in the bookshelves than the chatter. Colonel Easterbrook and his much younger wife, Laura, stood by the fireplace, his bluster about security measures barely masking her boredom. The vicar's wife, Mrs. Harmon, fluttered about, her enthusiasm undimmed even by the eerie occasion. And then there were Letitia's household, Dora Bunner fussing over a spilled drink, Patrick and Julius Simmons exchanging sly glances, Mitzi, the housekeeper muttering in the kitchen, and Philippa Hames hovering at the edges, her face unreadable. Miss Marple noted the tension beneath the pleasantries hands that gripped glasses too tightly, smiles that didn't reach the eyes. Something was off, and she intended to find out what. The announcement had promised a murder at 6:30 p.m., and as the mantel clock chimed the half-hour, a hush fell over the room. Letitia, standing by the door, clapped her hands with a laugh that sounded forced. "Well, here we are. Shall we see what this nonsense is about?" she said, her voice bright but her eyes scanning the crowd. The guests chuckled nervously, expecting a parlor game or perhaps a dramatic reading. Miss Marple, however, wasn't so sure. She'd seen enough of human nature to know that evil often hid behind a cheerful façade. Her gaze flicked to the windows, where the curtains stirred slightly, though no breeze was present. Was someone outside watching? The thought sent a shiver down her spine, but she kept her composure, her needles clicking steadily. She recalled a case in St. Marymead where a seemingly innocent gathering had ended in bloodshed, all because of a single overlooked detail. Tonight, she vowed, she would miss nothing then. Without warning, the lights went out. A collective gasp rose from the guests, followed by a giggle or two. Surely this was part of the game. But the darkness felt heavy, oppressive, and the giggles faded into uneasy silence. A door creaked somewhere in the house, and footsteps quick, deliberate echoed in the hall. Miss Marple's grip tightened on her knitting. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the faint glow from the hall. A man, his face obscured, held something in his hand, a flashlight, or was it something more sinister? "Hands up!" he barked, his voice rough, unfamiliar. A woman screamed, "Mitzi!" Miss Marple thought, and then a deafening crack split the air. A gunshot. The room erupted in chaos, shouts, scuffling, the crash of a glass hitting the floor. When the lights flickered back on moments later, the scene was one of pandemonium. Letitia Blacklock stood clutching her ear, a trickle of blood seeping between her fingers. On the floor lay the stranger, motionless, a revolver beside him. The air smelled of gunpowder, and the village's cozy illusion shattered like glass. Miss Marple's eyes darted around the room, taking in every detail: Letitia's pale face, Dora's trembling hands, Patrick's quick step toward the body, Julia's frozen stare. The guests were in shock, some frozen, others babbling. Colonel Easterbrook knelt beside the man, declaring him dead, a single bullet to the chest. "Who is he?" Mrs. Swetnam whispered, her curiosity outweighing her fear. No one knew. He was a stranger, his face unfamiliar, his pockets empty. Save for a crumpled train ticket, Letitia, still clutching her ear, insisted she was fine. But Miss Marple noted the faint tremor in her voice. Was the shot meant for her? Or was this all part of a larger plan? The police were called, but Miss Marple's mind was already racing. The announcement had promised a murder, and now a man was dead, but the puzzle felt incomplete. Why stage such a public spectacle? And why was Letitia the supposed target? So quick to dismiss it as an accident. As the guests huddled in the drawing room, whispering and casting suspicious glances, Miss Marple slipped into the background, her knitting a quiet rhythm against the chaos. She thought of the announcement's precise wording, the theatrical timing of the blackout, the stranger's sudden appearance, This was no random act. She was certain. Someone in this room or just beyond it knew more than they were letting on. The question was, who and what did they stand to gain? As the police sirens wailed in the distance, Miss Marple made a mental note of every face, every reaction. The game, if it was won, had turned deadly, and she was determined to uncover the truth before another shot rang out. What just happened at Little Paddocks? Was the stranger the victim, or was Letitia the real target? The mystery is deepening, and Miss Marple's only getting started. In the next chapter, we'll follow her as she digs into the stranger's identity and uncovers secrets that hit closer to home than anyone expects. What's your guess who's behind this chilling setup? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to keep up with this twisting tale. Stay tuned for more suspense. You won't want to miss what's coming next. The aftermath of the shooting at Little Paddocks left Chipping Cleghorn reeling, as if the village itself had been shaken awake from a pleasant dream. The drawing room, once warm with firelight and chatter, now felt like a stage where a grim play had just begun. The police had arrived, led by Inspector Craddock, a sharp-eyed man whose polite questions cut like a knife. The body of the stranger lay covered in a sheet, his identity still a mystery, while Letitia Blacklock sat with a bandage on her ear, insisting the bullet that grazed her was a fluke. The guests, still shaken, lingered in clusters, their whispers laced with fear and fascination. Miss Jane Marple, tucked in her corner with her knitting, watched it all with a quiet intensity. To her, the scene was a tapestry of clues. Every nervous glance, every hesitant word, a thread to be unraveled. The announcement had promised a murder, and though a man was dead, Miss Marple sensed the real danger was far from over. Something deeper, more calculated, lurked beneath the surface, and she was determined to find it. Step back into Little Paddocks with me. The room still smells faintly of gunpowder, and the shattered glass from a dropped tumbler glints on the floor. Inspector Craddock moves methodically, questioning each guest while his officers search the house. The stranger, they've learned, carried no wallet, no papers, only that crumpled train ticket from London. His dark coat and scarf, now evidence, offer no hints of his purpose. Was he a hired thug, a drifter, or something else entirely? Letitia, pale but composed, recounts the moment the lights went out, the man's barked command, and the sudden shot. It was all so fast, she says, her voice steady, but her fingers twisting a handkerchief. Miss Marple, unnoticed by most, notes the slight quiver in Letitia's tone. Is it shock, or something more? The other household members are equally rattled. Dora Bunner weeps softly, muttering about poor Letty. Patrick and Julia exchange guarded looks. Mitzi, the housekeeper, insists she saw a shadow outside the window before the blackout. And Philippa Hames stands silently, her face a mask of calm that Miss Marple finds oddly telling. The villagers, meanwhile, can't resist spinning theories. Mrs. Swettenham, ever the gossip, suggests the man was a burglar spooked by the crowd. Colonel Easterbrook, stroking his mustache, mutters about foreign agents, a theory Inspector Craddock dismisses with a polite smile. Mrs. Harmon, the vicar's wife, clings to Miss Marple's arm, whispering, "It's just like one of those dreadful novels, isn't it?" But Miss Marple knows this is no novel. She's seen enough real crimes to recognize the signs, the staged drama of the blackout, the precise timing of the announcement, the revolver left conveniently by the body. It feels orchestrated, like a performance meant to distract. Her mind drifts to a case in St. Marymead, where a staged robbery hid a far more personal motive. Could this be similar? She makes a mental note to ask about the house's wiring. Blackouts don't just happen. Not in a home as well-kept as Little Paddocks. Inspector Craddock turns his attention to Letitia's past, probing gently about her Inheritance from Randall Godler. Miss Marple listens closely as Letitia explains. Godler, a wealthy financier, left her a fortune, but it came with strings. If Letitia dies without heirs, the money passes to Godler's distant relatives, including a mysterious figure known only as Pip and Emma. The names hang in the air, unfamiliar to the villagers but ringing a bell in Miss Marple's mind. Could someone in this room be connected to that inheritance? Patrick and Julia, the cousins, claim to be distant relatives of Letitia, but their flippant demeanor raises Miss Marple's suspicions. Dora Bunner, dabbing her eyes. Let's slip that Letitia once worked as Godler's secretary, a detail that seems to surprise even Letitia. Oh, Bunny, that was ages ago, Letitia says quickly. But Miss Marple catches the fleeting panic in her eyes. Money, Miss Marple knows, is a motive that festers like a wound. As the police wrap up their initial questions, Miss Marple slips into the garden, where the evening chill carries a hint of menace. She examines the window Mitzi claimed to see her. Shadow near. The latch is loose, easily jimmied, and the ground below shows faint scuff marks too faint to be conclusive, but enough to make her pause. Back inside, she overhears Mitzi arguing with Patrick in the kitchen. Her voice shrill. You think I lie. I saw someone. I tell you. Patrick's reply is too low to catch, but his tone is sharp. Miss Marple files it away, along with Julia's habit of avoiding eye contact and Philippa's unnatural stillness. The stranger's death feels like the opening act, not the finale. Was he the intended victim, a pawn in a larger scheme, or a warning to Letitia? And why announce it at all? The public nature of the Gazette notice nags at Miss Marple. It's bold, almost taunting. As if someone wanted the whole village to watch, the police leave with promises to return, and the guests disperse, their chatter now subdued. Letitia insists everyone stay calm, but her smile is strained. Miss Marple, walking back to the vicarage with Mrs. Harmon, feels the weight of unseen eyes. Chipping Cleghorn is no longer the safe haven it seemed, and the shadows seem to whisper secrets. She thinks of the revolver, its cold metal a stark contrast to the cozy drawing room. Someone planned this. She's certain someone who knew the house, the people, the stakes. As she climbs the vicarage stairs, her knitting bag swinging gently, Miss Marple resolves to dig deeper. The truth, she knows, lies in the small things, the lies half told, the glances unguarded. What's going on in Little Paddocks? Is Letitia the target? Or is she playing a dangerous game of her own? The plot's thickening, and Miss Marple's sharp mind is our guide. In the next chapter, we'll follow her as she uncovers a clue that ties the stranger to the village and to a secret someone's desperate to keep buried. What do you think the stranger was doing there? Share your theories in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to stay with this gripping mystery. The suspense is only building. Stick around for what's next. The morning after the shooting at Little Paddocks, Chipping Cleghorn woke to a sky heavy with clouds, as if the village itself were holding its breath. The news of the stranger's death spread like wildfire, whispered over garden fences and debated in the tea room. Who was he, this man who'd burst into Letitia Blacklock's drawing room, revolver in hand, only to end up dead on her polished floor? The Gazette announcement, once a curiosity, now felt like a prophecy fulfilled, and the villagers' curiosity had curdled into unease. At the vicarage, Miss Jane Marple sat by the window, her knitting needles clicking softly as she listened to Mrs. Harmon's breathless recounting of the latest gossip. But Miss Marple's mind was elsewhere, turning over the events of the previous night, the blackout, the gunshot, Letitia's grazed ear, and the stranger's lifeless form. To her, the pieces didn't fit. The announcement had been too public, the attack too theatrical. Someone was pulling strings, and Miss Marple was determined to find the puppeteer. As she sipped her tea, her sharp eyes missed nothing, and she knew the key to the mystery lay in uncovering who the stranger was, and why he'd come to Little Paddocks. Let's step back into the heart of Chipping Cleghorn, where the village is. Charm feels increasingly like a mask. Picture the market square, usually bustling with farmers' stalls and cheerful banter, now hushed as neighbours exchange wary glances. The police, under Inspector Craddock's steady hand, have cordoned off Little Paddocks, but the village is alive with theories. Some say the stranger was a madman, others a thief spooked by the crowd. Colonel Easterbrook, puffing out his chest at the post office, insists it's the work of international criminals, while Mrs. Swettenham, clutching her shopping basket, whispers about a jilted lover from Letitia's past. Miss Marple, however, knows better than to trust idle speculation. She's seen enough crimes to recognize the signs of a carefully laid plan. The stranger's lack of identification bothers her. No wallet, no letters, just that crumpled train ticket from London. It's as if he'd been stripped of his identity, deliberately made a cipher. But ciphers, she knows, can be decoded, and she's already forming a plan to do just that. At the vicarage, Miss Marple listens as Mrs. Harmon relays a tidbit from the postmistress. The stranger had been seen at the train station the day before, asking for directions to Little Paddocks. He'd seemed nervous, his accent faintly foreign, though no one could place it. Miss Marple's needles pause as she considers this. A foreigner in Chipping Cleghorn wasn't unusual. Post-war England was full of displaced souls, but his focus on Little Paddocks feels significant. She decides to visit the station herself, slipping out while Mrs. Harmon is distracted by her burnt scone. The station master, a grizzled man named Mr. Topman, remembers the stranger vividly. Kept looking over his shoulder. He did, Mr. Topman says, wiping his hands on his apron. Asked about Miss Blacklock's place, then bought a return ticket to London, like he wasn't planning to stay. A return ticket, Miss Marple muses, so he hadn't expected to die. Or had someone ensured he wouldn't leave? Back at Little Paddocks, Inspector Craddock is piecing together the stranger's final moments. The revolver, a wartime relic, has no fingerprints but the stranger's own, suggesting he fired it himself or was meant to appear that way. The bullet that grazed Letitia's ear came from the same gun, but the angle puzzles Craddock. It's as if he missed on purpose. He mutters to his sergeant, unaware that Miss Marple, lingering near the garden gate, overhears. She thinks of the blackout too convenient, too perfectly timed. Someone in the house had access to the fuse box, she reasons, and Mitzi's claim of a shadow outside the window keeps nagging at her. Could there have been an accomplice? She recalls a case in St. Mary Mead where a staged attack hid a deeper betrayal, and her suspicions deepen. Letitia, meanwhile, is back to hosting, offering tea to the police with a smile that Miss Marple finds increasingly brittle. I just want this over with, Letitia says, but her eyes dart to the door, as if expecting another intruder. Miss Marple's next stop is the Chipping Cleghorn Gazette office, a cramped room smelling of ink and old paper. The editor, Mr. Weatherby, is flustered by the police's questions about the announcement. It came in by post, typed, with a £5 note. He explains, showing Miss Marple the envelope. The postmark is local, the handwriting non-existent, just a typed slip with no signature. Thought it was a joke, honestly, Mr. Weatherby says, mopping his brow. Miss Marple's lips purse. £5 was no small sum for a prank. Someone wanted that notice seen, and they wanted it tied to Little Paddocks. She asks to see the original slip, noting its crisp, professional typing. No village typewriter. Produced that, she thinks. This was planned, possibly from outside Chipping Cleghorn, but by someone who knew the village well. Back at the vicarage, Miss Marple pieces together what she's learned. The stranger, nervous and foreign, had come to Little Paddocks with a purpose. The announcement, paid for anonymously, had drawn a crowd, ensuring witnesses. The blackout had created chaos, and the gunshot had left Letitia wounded but alive. It feels staged, Miss Marple decides, but for whose benefit? She thinks of Letitia's inheritance from Randall Goodler, the mysterious Pip and Emma who stand to gain if Letitia dies. Could the stranger have been connected to them, or was he a hired hand? Meant to scare rather than kill, Miss Marple's mind drifts to the household. Patrick and Julia, the cousins, are to glib, their alibis to neat. Dora Bunner's nervous chatter seems to hide something, and Mitzi's hysterics feel almost rehearsed. Philippa Hames, the quiet boarder, remains an enigma, her silence louder than words. As evening falls, Miss Marple walks through the village, the lamplights casting long shadows. She passes Little Paddocks, where a light burns late in Letitia's window. A figure moves behind the curtain. Letitia, or someone else? Miss Marple's thoughts turn to the revolver, the ticket, the typed notice. Each clue is a thread, and she's beginning to see a pattern. The stranger's death was no accident, she's certain. But was he the target, or was Letitia meant to die? And what if the announcement's promise a murder is announced? It feels like a challenge, a taunt from someone who knows more than they're letting on. Miss Marple's needles resume their rhythm as she vows to uncover the truth. No matter how deeply it's buried, the mystery's tightening its grip, and Miss Marple's closing in on the truth, or is she? In the next chapter, will follow her as she digs into Letitia's past and uncovers a connection that threatens to unravel the entire village. Who was the stranger, and what did he know? Drop your guesses in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to keep up with this chilling tale. The suspense is building, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. The days following the shooting at Little Paddocks draped Chipping Cleghorn in a fog of unease, as if the village's very air carried whispers of secrets yet to be uncovered. The stranger's death remained the talk of every corner shop and garden gate, but answers were scarce. His identity was still unknown, his body unclaimed, and the police were no closer to solving the mystery of the Gazette announcement. At the vicarage, Miss Jane Marple sat by the fire, her knitting a steady rhythm as she sifted through the clues in her mind. The blackout, the gunshot, Letitia's grazed ear. The typed notice, they all pointed to a plan, one woven with precision and malice. But what was its purpose? Miss Marple's sharp eyes gleamed behind her spectacles. She knew the truth often lay in the past, in the tangled threads of old promises and buried grudges. Today, she resolved to unravel Letitia Blacklock's history, sensing that the key to the stranger's death and the danger still lurking lay hidden in the shadows of yesteryears. Let's linger in Chipping Cleghorn for a moment, where the village's charm now feels like a thin veneer over something darker. Picture the narrow lanes lined with stone walls, the church spire piercing a sky heavy with rain clouds, and the villagers' faces, etched with curiosity and suspicion. The police, led by Inspector Craddock, have been combing through Little Paddocks, but their questions yield little. The revolver, they've confirmed, was an old wartime model, untraceable. The train ticket in the stranger's pocket suggests he came from London, but no one at the station recalls more than his nervous demeanour. Miss Marple, however, isn't waiting for official reports. She's learned from Mrs. Harmon that Letitia Blacklock once worked as a secretary for Randall Goodler, the financier whose fortune she inherited. That connection, Miss Marple muses, is no coincidence. Money, she knows, is a magnet for trouble, and Letitia's wealth has cast a long shadow over Little Paddocks. Miss Marple's first move is a quiet visit to the village library, a dusty room tucked behind the post office. There she pores over old newspapers, searching for mentions of Randall Goodler, the librarian Miss Murgatroyd. A nervous woman with a penchant for romantic novels is eager to help. Oh, Mr. Godler was quite the figure, she says, pulling out a yellowed clipping from the 1930s. The article describes Godler as a shrewd businessman with a sprawling estate and a complicated family. His wife, Sonia, was rarely seen, and their only child died young, leaving the fortune to Letitia upon Godler's death. But the will. Miss Marple learns had a catch. If Letitia dies without heirs, the money passes to Pip and Emma. So, his elusive siblings. The names echo in Miss Marple's mind. Could someone in Little Paddocks, Patrick, Julia, or even the quiet Philippa be one of these heirs, hiding in plain sight, back at the vicarage? Miss Marple shares tea with Mrs. Harmon, gently steering. The conversation to Letitia's past, Mrs. Harmon, ever chatty, recalls that Letitia arrived in Chipping Cleghorn after the war, a widow with no children. Her life before that a bit of a mystery. She's so proper, you'd think she was born here, Mrs. Harmon says. But Dora Bunner once mentioned something about London and a sister. Miss Marple's needles pause. A sister? Letitia has never spoken of family, only her cousins. Patrick and Julia. She thinks of Dora's nervous chatter. Her tendency to let slip details Letitia quickly hushes. Could Dora know more than she realizes, Miss Marple decides to pay a call at Little Paddocks. Under the guise of returning a borrowed recipe book, the real purpose, of course, is to observe the household and to probe Dora's scatterbrained. Memory dot at Little Paddocks, the atmosphere is strained. Letitia greets Miss Marple with her usual warmth, but her eyes are tired, her smile tight. Dora, fussing over a tray of scones, seems more flustered than usual, her hands trembling as she pours tea. Patrick and Julia are absent, off on some errand, while Mitzi, the housekeeper, slams pots in the kitchen, muttering about cursed houses. Philippa Hames sits quietly in the corner, reading. Her calm demeanour a stark contrast to the tension. Around her, Miss Marple, ever the gentle conversationalist, draws Dora into talk of old times. You and Letitia go back so far, don't you? She says, her tone light. Dora's face lights up. Then clouds. Oh yes, school days. And then, well, there was Charlotte. She stops, her eyes darting to Letitia, who coughs sharply. Bunny, we needn't bore Miss Marple with ancient history, Letitia says. But Miss Marple catches the warning in her voice. Charlotte. Another thread to tug. As Miss Marple sips her tea, she steers the conversation to the shooting. Letitia repeats her story. The stranger burst in. The lights went out. The gun fired. I suppose he panicked, she says, touching the bandage on her ear. But Miss Marple's mind is on the fuse box, tucked in the pantry. She casually asks Mitzi about it later, while helping clear the tea things. Mitzi, her eyes wide, insists she heard footsteps near the pantry before the blackout. Someone was there, I swear it, she says, her accent thick with agitation. Miss Marple nods, her thoughts racing. The blackout was no accident, she's certain. Someone in the house or an outsider with access had flipped the switch. She recalls the scuff marks by the window, the loose latch. An accomplice, perhaps, or a distraction to mask the real intent. That evening, Miss Marple sits in her room at the vicarage, her knitting idle as she pieces together the puzzle. The stranger's arrival, the announcement, the blackout, they're all parts of a larger design. Letitia's inheritance is the key, she's sure, but the mention of Charlotte nags at her. Was she Letitia's sister, a friend, or something else? And what of Pip and Emma, the shadowy heirs? Miss Marple thinks of Patrick and Julia, their easy charm and vague pasts. Could they be more than cousins? Or is Philippa, with a quiet reserve, hiding a connection to Godler's fortune? The stranger's death feels like a warning shot, not the end game. Miss Marple's eyes narrow as she recalls a case in St. Marymead where a forgotten sibling had sparked a deadly chain of events. History, she knows, has a way of repeating itself as the village settles into an uneasy night. Miss Marple hears a distant creak outside the vicarage. She peers through the window, seeing only darkness, but her instincts prickle. Someone is watching, waiting. The announcement promised a murder, and though one man is dead, Miss Marple fears the real target is still in danger. Letitia's façade, Dora's slip about Charlotte. The household's uneasy dynamics, they all point to a truth buried deep. Miss Marple's needles resume their rhythm, a quiet promise to herself. She'll dig until she finds it, no matter how many lies she must unravel. The web is tightening, and Miss Marple's closing in on a truth that could shake Little Paddocks to its core. In the next chapter, we'll follow her as she uncovers a startling link between the stranger and someone in the house, a link that brings the danger closer than ever. Who's hiding what? And who's next in the killer's sights? Drop your theories in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to stay with this gripping mystery. The suspense is mounting. Stay tuned for the next twist. The fog that clung to Chipping Cleghorn seemed to thicken with each passing day, as if the village were trapped in a web of its own secrets. The shooting at Little Paddocks had left a scar on the community, and the unanswered questions about the stranger's identity only deepened the unease. Who was he? And why had he targeted Letitia Blacklock, or had he? The Gazette announcement, once a chilling curiosity, now loomed like a spectre, its promise of murder fulfilled yet incomplete. At the vicarage, Miss Jane Marple sat in her usual chair, her knitting a quiet metronome as she pieced together the fragments of the puzzle. The mention of Charlotte during her visit to Little Paddocks lingered in her mind, a name spoken, in haste and quickly silenced. Miss Marple's instincts told her it was no coincidence. The past, she knew, had a way of clawing its way into the present, and she was determined to unearth the truth before another life was claimed. Today, she would follow the thread of Charlotte, sensing it led to the heart of the mystery. Let's return to Chipping Cleghorn, where the village's quaint charm now feels like a stage set for a tragedy. Picture the market square, its cobblestones slick with morning dew, the air heavy with the scent of wood smoke and suspicion. The villagers go about their routines, but their conversations are hushed, their eyes darting to Little Paddocks, where police tape still flutters at the gate. Inspector Craddock's investigation has hit a wall. The stranger's fingerprints yield no matches, and the revolver's origins remain murky. The train ticket, however, has led to a faint lead in London. Who tell where the man stayed the night before the shooting? Craddock shares this with Miss Marple over tea at the vicarage, unaware that her gentle questions are as probing as his own. Did he register under a name? She asks, her tone mild. Craddock nods. Rüdiger's a Swiss national. Worked as a waiter, but the hotel staff say he was jumpy, always checking the door. Miss Marple's needles pause. Rüdiger's, a name at last, but one that raises more questions than answers. Miss Marple's thoughts turn to Letitia's past, particularly the name Charlotte. She recalls Dora Bunner's slip, the way Letitia's face tightened at the mention. To dig deeper, Miss Marple enlists Mrs. Harmon's help, knowing her friend's knack for gossip could unlock doors the police can't. Over scones at the tea room, Mrs. Harmon chats with Mrs. Swettenham, who mentions a rumor from years ago Letitia had a sister, Charlotte, who died young, or so the story went. No one talks about it, Mrs. Swettenham says, lowering her voice. Letitia clams up if you ask. Miss Marple, pretending to fuss with a napkin, listens intently. A dead sister or one presumed dead could explain Letitia's guarded nature, She thinks of Randall Godler's will, with its mention of Pip and Emma as potential heirs. Could Charlotte be connected to them, or was she a piece of Letitia's past someone wanted buried? Determined to learn more, Miss Marple visits Little Paddocks again, this time with a pretext of borrowing a gardening book. Letitia welcomes her, but the strain in her smile is unmistakable. The household is on edge. Dora Bunner fidgets with her teacup. Patrick and Julia are oddly subdued, and Mitzi, polishing silver in the dining room, mutters about ghosts in this house. Philippa Hames, as usual, keeps to herself, tending the garden with a focus that borders on obsessive. Miss Marple steers the conversation to old friends, casually mentioning school days. Dora, eager to reminisce, begins a story about deer. Charlotte, only to be cut off by Letitia's sharp, "Bunny, that's enough." The room grows quiet, and Miss Marple notes the flicker of fear in Dora's eyes. Later, in the garden, she approaches Philippa, who's pruning roses with a precision that feels almost mechanical. "You must find this house peaceful, Miss," Marple says, probing gently. Philippa's reply is curt, "It's quiet enough," but her hands tremble slightly, and Miss Marple wonders what lies behind her guarded exterior. Back at the vicarage, Miss Marple receives a call from Inspector Craddock, who's uncovered more about Rudishers. The Swiss waiter had a history of petty crime, small-time theft, mostly, but no record of violence. His hotel room in London held a curious find, a photograph of two young women, one resembling Letitia in her younger days, the other, unidentified, had a scar on her neck, barely visible. Miss Marple's mind races. Could the second woman be Charlotte? She recalls Dora's mention of Letitia working for Godler, a job that placed her close to wealth and secrets. What if Charlotte wasn't dead, but hidden perhaps even in Chipping Cleghorn? The thought sends a chill through her. She thinks of a case in St. Mary Mead, where a long-lost relative returned under a false name, sparking a chain of deceit. Could someone in Little Paddocks be playing a similar game? Miss Marple's next move is to speak with Mitzi, who's nervous. Outbursts might hide useful truths. She finds the housekeeper in the kitchen, scrubbing pots with furious energy. This house, it's cursed, Mitzi declares, her eyes wild. Miss Marple, offering to dry dishes, gently asks about the night of the shooting. Mitzi insists she heard two voices outside the window before the blackout, one familiar, one not. Like they argue, then quiet, she says. Miss Marple's heart quickens. Two voices suggest an accomplice, someone who knew the house's layout. She thinks of the fuse box, the scuff marks, the loose latch, the announcement, the blackout, the shooting. It's all too neat to staged. Rudishers, she suspects, was a pawn hired to create chaos while the real plan unfolded. But what was that plan, and who was behind it? As night falls, Miss Marple walks through the village, Herschel pulled tight against the chill. The lights of Little Paddocks glow in the distance, but one window is dark, its curtain drawn. She thinks of the photograph, the name Charlotte, the heirs Pip and Emma. The pieces are falling into place, but the picture is still blurry. Was Rudishers sent to kill Letitia or to scare her? And why announce it to the world? Miss Marple's needles resume their rhythm as she sits by the vicarage fire, her mind weaving connections. The stranger's death was just the beginning, she's certain. Someone in Little Paddocks, perhaps, someone she's spoken to today knows the truth. And that truth, she fears, will lead to another murder. The stakes are rising, and Miss Marple's closing in on a secret that could tear Little Paddocks apart. In the next chapter, we'll follow her as she uncovers a shocking link between Rudishers and the household, one that brings the killer's motive into sharp focus. Who's hiding the truth? And what are they willing to do to keep it buried? Drop your guesses in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to stay with this twisting mystery. The suspense is thicker than ever. Don't miss what's coming next. The air in Chipping Cleghorn grew colder as October waned, mirroring the chill of suspicion that had settled over the village. The shooting at Little Paddocks was no longer just a scandal. It was a wound that refused to heal, festering with unanswered questions. Rudy Schurz, the mysterious Swiss waiter, lay dead, his brief appearance in the village leaving a trail of confusion and fear. The Gazette announcement, with its chilling promise of murder, seemed to mock the villagers' attempts to make sense of it all. At the vicarage, Miss Jane Marple sat by the fire, her knitting needles moving with their usual steady rhythm, but her mind was far from calm. The photograph found in Schurz's hotel room two young women, one resembling a youthful Letitia Blacklock, gnawed at her thoughts. The name Charlotte, Dora's slip about a sister, and the shadowy heirs Pip and Emma swirled in her mind like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, scattered across a table. Miss Marple knew the truth was close, hidden in the connections between past and present, and she was determined to find it before the killer struck again. Let's step back into Chipping Cleghorn, where the village feels like a chessboard, each resident apiece in a game only Miss Marple seems to understand. Picture the narrow streets, now quiet as dusk falls, the lamplights casting eerie shadows that seem to shift and whisper. The police, under Inspector Craddock's diligent lead, have traced Rudy Schurz's movements to a seedy London hotel, but his motives remain elusive. The photograph, now in Craddock's evidence file, is the strongest clue yet. One woman, clearly Letitia in her 20s, smiles brightly. The other, with a faint scar on her neck, looks more reserved, her eyes guarded. Miss Marple invited to the police station under the pretense of assisting with local knowledge, studies the image closely. The scar, she notes, is unusual, not a surgical mark, but something jagged like an old injury. Could this be Charlotte, Letitia's supposed sister? And why was Schurz carrying the photo? Miss Marple's mind hums with possibilities, each one pointing to a deeper plot. Her next move is to revisit Little Paddocks, this time with a sharper focus. She arrives under the guise of returning a borrowed scarf. Her demeanor is unassuming as ever. Letitia greets her warmly, but her eyes are shadowed, her hands fidgeting with a brooch. The household is quieter today. Dora Bunner is napping, Patrick and Julia are in the village, and Mitzi is scrubbing the kitchen floor with a vigor that borders on manic. Philippa Hames, as always, is in the garden, her solitude a wall miss. Marple longs to breach, over tea. Miss Marple gently probes Letitia about her early years with Randall Godeler. You must have seen so much in London, she says, her tone light. Letitia's smile tightens. Oh, it was just office work. Nothing glamorous. But Dora, waking from her nap and joining them, blurts out, You were so close to Charlotte then. Letty, always together, you two. Letitia's cup clatters in its saucer and she laughs it off. Bunny's memory plays tricks, she says, but Miss Marple catches the strain in her voice. Charlotte, again. The name is a ghost that won't stay buried. Miss Marple shifts her attention to the photograph's implications. She asks Inspector Craddock if Schurz had any connections to Godeler's circle. Craddock, warming to her insights, shares that Schurz worked briefly at a Swiss hotel where Godeler once stayed. A coincidence? Perhaps, Craddock says, but Miss Marple doesn't believe in coincidences. She suspects Schurz was hired, perhaps blackmailed into coming to Little Paddocks, possibly to confront Letitia or to stage the shooting. But by whom? She thinks of the will, with its clause about Pip and Emma. If Letitia dies, they inherit, but their identities remain a mystery. Could one of them be in the village, masquerading as a friend or relative? Patrick and Julia, the cousins, are too young to be Pip or Emma, but their evasive answers about their past bother Miss Marple. She recalls Julia's sharp glance when the shooting was mentioned, and Patrick's quick move to check the body. Were they protecting Letitia or ensuring the plan went smoothly? To dig deeper, Miss Marple visits the village chemist, Mr. Rollinson. WHO's known Letitia for years. Over a chat about rose tonics, she casually mentions old photographs, wondering if he's seen any of Letitia's family. Rollinson, a kindly man with a sharp memory, recalls a picture Letitia once showed him, a young woman with a scar like a burn. Poor thing. He assumed it was a cousin, but Letitia never elaborated. Miss Marple's heart quickens. The scar matches the woman in Scherz's photo. She thanks Rollinson and hurries back to the vicarage, her mind racing. If Charlotte was Letitia's sister, why hide her existence? Was she dead, as rumoured, or alive and closer than anyone suspected? Miss Marple thinks of Philippa Haynes, her quiet intensity, her guarded past. Could she be Charlotte, or even Emma, hiding in plain sight? Or is Letitia herself not what she seems? That evening, Miss Marple sits with Mrs. Harmon, who shares her. New tidbit: Mitzi, the housekeeper, has been acting stranger than usual, locking herself in her room at night. Miss Marple recalls Mitzi's claim of hearing two voices before the blackout. She decides to speak with her, finding Mitzi in the pantry, her eyes red from crying. "I know nothing," Mitzi snaps, but under Miss Marple's gentle persistence, she admits to overhearing a phone call days before the shooting. A man's voice, not English, saying it must be done soon. "I tell no one, I scared." Miss Marple nods, her suspicions deepening. Scherz wasn't acting alone. Someone in Little Paddocks or with access to it knew he was coming. She thinks of the fuse box, the scuff marks, the typed Gazette notice. It's a web, and at its center is Letitia's fortune and perhaps her life. As rain patters against the vicarage windows, Miss Marple pieces together the clues. Rudy Scherz was a pawn, sent to stage a murder that didn't quite succeed. The photograph suggests he knew something about Letitia's past, possibly about Charlotte. The announcement was a law, drawing witnesses to mask the real intent. But what was that intent? To kill Letitia, to scare her, or to expose a secret? Miss Marple's needles slow as she considers the household. Dora's slips, Patrick's charm, Julia's evasiveness, Philippa's silence, Mitzi's fear, they all point to a truth buried in the past. She recalls a case in St. Mary Mead where a hidden identity led to murder. Could Chipping Cleghorn hold a similar secret? The photograph, she's certain, is the key, and she vows to uncover its story before the killer's next move. The mysteries. Coils are tightening, and Miss Marple's steps are closing in on a truth that could shatter Little Paddocks. In the next chapter, we'll follow her as she uncovers a chilling connection between Charlotte and the household one. That puts a new suspect in the crosshairs. Who's pulling the strings and who's next to fall? Share your theories in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to keep up with this gripping tale. The suspense is at its peak. Stay tuned for what's next. The rain that had threatened Chipping Cleghorn all week finally broke, drumming against the roofs and turning the village lanes into rivers of mud. The gloom matched the mood at Little Paddocks, where the shadow of Rudy Scherz's death lingered, like an unwelcome guest. The Gazette announcement, the blackout, the gunshot, and now the photograph of two women, one with a scarred neck, had woven a web of suspicion that tightened with each passing day. Miss Jane Marple, sitting by the carriage window, watched the rain streak the glass, her knitting needles moving with a rhythm that belied the storm in her mind. The name Charlotte, the mysterious heirs Pip and Emma, and Rudy Scherz's connection to Randall Godler's circle pointed to a secret buried deep in Letitia Blacklock's past. Miss Marple was certain now someone in Little Paddocks was not. Who they claimed to be, the photograph was the key, and today she would tug at its threads until the truth unraveled or someone else paid the price. Let's step back into the heart of Chipping Cleghorn, where the village feels like a stage. Mid-performance, the actors unaware of the script's deadly twist. Picture the market square sodden and deserted. The tea room's windows fogged with steam as villagers huddle inside, whispering about the latest rumours. Inspector Craddock's investigation has intensified, with officers combing through Scherzes, past in Switzerland and London. They've learned he worked at a hotel where Godler's associates once gathered, but no clear link to Letitia has surfaced. The photograph, however, haunts Miss Marple. The woman with the scar, possibly Charlotte, suggests a hidden history, one Letitia is desperate to keep buried. Miss Marple's thoughts keep circling back to Dora Bonner's nervous slips and Letitia's. Quick corrections. Could Dora know the truth about Charlotte? Or is she merely a pawn in a larger game? Miss Marple decides to confront the household directly. Arriving at Little Paddocks with a basket of apples as a pretext, the house feels colder today. Its warmth drained by the weight of secrets. Letitia greets her with a strained smile, her bandage gone but a faint mark still visible on her ear. Dora Bonner, hovering nearby, seems more agitated than usual, her hands fluttering like trapped birds. Patrick and Julia are in the drawing room, playing cards with forced nonchalance, while Nitsie, in the kitchen, slams a cupboard door, muttering about lies and danger. Philippa Hames is absent, working at the nearby estate, but her absence feels significant to Miss Marple. She settles into a chair, her knitting bag at her side, and steers the conversation toward old photographs, hoping to rattle someone. "I found an old album at the vicarage," she lies gently, "with such lovely pictures. Do you keep any?" Letitia's smile falters. "Not many," she says. "They get lost over time." Dora, however, takes the bait. "Oh, Letty, you used to have that one of you and Charlotte from the garden party," she exclaims, then freezes as Letitia's eyes flash with warning. "Bunny, you're mixing things up again," Letitia says sharply, but Dora's face crumples. "I'm not. I remember her scarf, the one she wore to hide." She stops, her voice trembling, and Miss Marple's heart skips a beat. A scarf to hide a scar. The photograph's image burns in her mind. She presses gently. "Charlotte sounds dear. Was she your sister, Letitia?" The room goes silent, the air thick with tension. Letitia's laugh is brittle. "Oh, just a friend from long ago. She passed away. Poor thing." But Miss Marple catches the lie in her eyes, the way her fingers twist her brooch. Dora, near tears, excuses herself, and Miss Marple knows she struck a nerve. Later, Miss Marple corners Dora alone in the garden, where the rain has slowed to a drizzle. Dora, clutching a shawl, looks like a woman haunted. "I didn't mean to upset Letty," she whispers. Miss Marple, her voice soft as velvet, coaxes her to talk. "You mentioned a scarf, dear. Was Charlotte unwell?" Dora's eyes dart around, then she leans in. "She had a mark on her neck from an accident," she said. "Letty made her hide it. Said it wasn't proper to show." Miss Marple nods, her mind racing. A scar, like the woman in Scherz's photo. Could Charlotte be alive, posing as someone else? She thinks of Letitia herself, her polished demeanor, her vague past. What if Letitia wasn't Letitia at all, but Charlotte, hiding behind her sister's name? The thought is staggering, but Miss Marple has seen stranger deceptions in her time. Her suspicions deepen when Inspector Craddock shares a new clue. A letter found in Scherz's hotel room, half written in German, addressed to L. It mentions The truth about C and demands payment to stay silent. Blackmail, Miss Marple realizes. Schurz knew something about Charlotte, perhaps her identity, perhaps her survival. Was he sent to Little Paddocks to expose her, or to silence her? She thinks of the blackout, the stage drama of the shooting. Someone wanted Schurz dead, she's sure, to keep his secret buried. But who? Patrick and Julia, with their slippery alibis, Mitzi, with her eavesdropped phone call, or Philippa, whose silence feels more like a shield every day. Miss Marple recalls a case in St. Marymead where a blackmailer's death led to a second murder, and she fears history is repeating itself. That night, as the rain drums harder, Miss Marple sits with Mrs. Harmon, who shares a chilling piece of gossip. Philippa Haynes was seen arguing with Patrick in the village. Their voices low but heated. Something about money, Mrs. Harmon says. Miss Marple's needles slow. Money again. Godler's fortune, with its promise to Pip and Emma, looms over everything. Could Philippa be Emma, hiding her identity, or is Patrick Pip playing the charming cousin while plotting to inherit? The household is a nest of vipers, and Miss Marple knows the next strike is coming. She thinks of the loose window latch, the scuff marks, the two voices Mitzi heard. Someone in Little Paddocks is orchestrating this, and they're not done as she prepares for bed. Miss Marple hears a faint noise outside, a twig snapping, to deliver it to be the wind. She peers through the curtains, seeing only darkness, but her instincts scream danger. The photograph, the letter. Charlotte's scar, they're all pieces of a puzzle that points to a truth someone will kill to protect. Miss Marple's needles rest in her lap as she vows to act quickly. The killer is close, and the next move could be deadly. The truth is slipping into view, but the danger's closer than ever. In the next chapter, Miss Marple uncovers a shocking revelation about Charlotte's fate and a betrayal that puts everyone at Little Paddocks at risk. Who's wearing a mask and who's ready to strike next? Drop your theories in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to keep up with this heart-pounding mystery. The suspense is unbearable. Stay tuned for the next twist. The rain had stopped, but Chipping Cleghorn remained cloaked in a damp chill, as if the village itself were shivering under the weight of its secrets. The shooting at Little Paddocks, Rudy Scherz's mysterious death, and the haunting photograph of two women, one with a scarred neck, had turned the village into a cauldron of suspicion. The name Charlotte, whispered and then silenced, hung over Miss Jane Marple like a storm cloud. At the vicarage, she sat by the fire, her knitting needles still, her mind racing through the clues, the Gazette announcement, the blackout, the blackmail letter, and Dora Bunner's trembling confession about a scarf hiding a scar. Miss Marple was certain now someone in Little Paddocks was living a lie, and that lie was tied to Randall Godler's fortune and the elusive heirs, Pip and Emma. The photograph suggested Charlotte, Letitia's supposed sister, was key, but was she dead, as claimed, or hiding in plain sight? Miss Marple knew the truth was close, and with it, danger. Tonight, she would confront the household, risking everything to unmask the killer before they struck again. Picture Chipping Cleghorn. Under a grey dawn, its cottages huddled against the cold, the church clock tolling mournfully. The villagers, once eager for gossip, now avoid Little Paddocks as if the house itself is cursed. Inspector Craddock's investigation has stalled. His leads on Rudy Scherz's is past drying up. The blackmail letter, with its cryptic reference to the truth about C, points to a secret worth killing for. But Craddock's focus is on Scherz's Swiss connections, not the household. Miss Marple, however, knows the answer lies closer to home. She thinks of Letitia's guarded demeanor, Dora's nervous lips, and the uneasy dynamics of Patrick, Julia, Mitzi, and Philippa. The photograph's scarred woman, possibly Charlotte, suggests a deception so bold it could only be pulled off by someone intimately familiar with Letitia's life. Miss Marple's heart races as she considers a chilling possibility. What if Letitia herself is Charlotte, masquerading as her sister to claim the inheritance? Miss Marple decides to act, requesting a gathering at Little Paddocks to discuss the incident with Inspector Craddock's blessing. She arrives in the late afternoon, her knitting bag a comforting weight at her side. The drawing room is tense, the fire doing little to warm the atmosphere. Letitia, pale but composed, pours tea, while Dora hovers, her eyes darting nervously. Patrick and Julia sit close, their usual banter subdued, and Mitzi, serving biscuits, glares at everyone. Philippa Hames, back from her work, stands by the window, her face unreadable. Miss Marple, settling into a chair, begins with gentle chatter about village life, but her words are a law. "I've been thinking about old friends," she says, her voice soft. "Families, too. It's strange how the past follows us, isn't it?" Letitia's cup rattles and Dora lets out a small gasp. Miss Marple presses on, mentioning the photograph. "A young woman with a scar, so like you, Letitia. Could it be Charlotte?" The room freezes. Letitia's smile vanishes, her hand gripping the teapot. "Charlotte's dead," she says flatly, but her voice wavers. Dora, trembling, blurts, "She's not, oh, Letty, tell them." Letitia's eyes blaze, but before she can speak, Mitzi drops a tray, the crash shattering the silence. "I knew it," Mitzi cries. "All lies, this house." Miss Marple's calm gaze sweeps the room, noting Patrick's clenched fists, Julia's sudden pallor, and Philippa's sharp intake of breath. She reveals what she's pieced together. Charlotte Blacklock, Letitia's sister, had a disfiguring scar from a childhood accident, hidden by scarves and shame. When Letitia died years ago, Charlotte assumed her identity, taking her place as Godler's heir to escape her own painful past. The fortune was hers, but only as Letitia Charlotte's existence was erased. Miss Marple's voice is steady as she continues. Rudy Schurz, she suspects, worked at a Swiss hotel where Charlotte, as Letitia, once visited Godler. He recognized her scar, perhaps from a dropped scarf, and began blackmailing her. The Gazette announcement was Charlotte's desperate plan to stage an attack, hiring Schurz to threaten her, ensuring his death in the chaos to silence him forever. The blackout, orchestrated by an accomplice likely Patrick. Who knew the fuse box guaranteed confusion? But something went wrong. Schurz fired too soon, grazing Charlotte's ear, and was killed by a second shot, possibly from another gun. Hidden in the room, Miss Marple's eyes lock on Patrick. "You were quick to check the body," she says. "Did you fire the second shot?" Patrick laughs, but it's hollow, and Julia's hand grips his arm. The room erupts. Dora sobs, confessing she knew Charlotte's secret but swore to keep it. Mitzi screams about hearing Patrick and Schurz arguing by phone days before. Philippa, silent until now, steps forward, her voice cold. "I'm not Emma," she says, quashing Miss Marple's suspicion. "But I know who is." She points to Julia, whose face drains of color. Julia, revealed as Emma, Godler's heir, admits she came to Little Paddocks to watch Charlotte, hoping to claim her share. Patrick, her brother Pip, had hired Schurz not to kill, but to scare Charlotte into revealing her deception. But Charlotte, Miss Marple realizes, turned the plan against them, ensuring Schurz's death to protect her secret. The second shooter she suspects was Charlotte herself, her grazed ear a calculated misdirection. Inspector Craddock, listening quietly, steps in, his face grim. "We'll need statements," he says, eyeing Charlotte Letitia, who sits frozen, her mask finally slipping. Miss Marple's heart aches for the woman who hid her pain behind a stolen name, but she knows justice must follow. The truth is out, but the danger lingers. Charlotte's eyes, filled with a mix of fear and defiance, suggest she may not go quietly. The web has unraveled, but the killer's still in play. In the next chapter, we'll follow Miss Marple as she faces Charlotte's final move and a desperate act that threatens to claim another life. Will justice prevail, or will the secrets of Little Paddocks claim one last victim? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to stay with this gripping mystery. The climax is near, don't miss it. The air in Little Paddocks was thick with the weight of truth revealed, as if the walls themselves exhaled the secrets they'd held for too long. The rain had ceased, leaving Chipping Cleghorn under a sky bruised with clouds, a fitting backdrop for the climax of a mystery that had shaken the village to its core. Miss Jane Marple stood in the drawing room, her knitting bag at her feet, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the storm of emotions around her. The unmasking of Charlotte Blacklock living as her sister Letitia. To claim Randall Goodler's fortune had shattered the household's fragile façade. Julia and Patrick, revealed as Emma and Pip, the rightful heirs, stood accused of orchestrating Rudy Scherz's arrival, while Charlotte herself had turned their plan against them, ensuring Scherz's death to protect her stolen identity. But the puzzle wasn't complete. Miss Marple knew Charlotte's desperation could spark one final, deadly act. As Inspector Craddock prepared to take statements, the tension in the room crackled like static before a lightning strike. The stage was set for the final act, and Miss Marple was ready to bring the curtain down. Let's linger in Little Paddocks one last time, where the cozy drawing room now feels like a courtroom. Its chintz curtains and flickering fire no match for the chill of betrayal. Picture the scene. Charlotte, her face pale but defiant, sits rigid in an armchair, her hands clasped tightly. Dora Bunner, sobbing quietly, clutches a handkerchief, her loyalty to her friend warring with the truth. Patrick and Julia, their charm stripped away, stand close, their eyes darting between Charlotte and the door. Mitzi, the housekeeper, hovers near the kitchen, her fear palpable, while Philippa Hames, cleared of being Emma, watches silently, her calm exterior hiding a flicker of relief. Inspector Craddock, notebook in hand, is methodical but tense, aware that Charlotte's confession is only half the story. Miss Marple, her voice soft but unwavering, takes center stage, her eyes scanning each face for the final clue. She knows the killer's work isn't done. Charlotte's secret is out, but her survival depends on silencing those who know too much. Miss Marple begins by recounting the night of the shooting. Her words deliberate, each one a step toward the truth. Rudy Scherz was no random intruder, she says, her gaze steady on Charlotte. He knew your secret, didn't he? That you were Charlotte, not Letitia, hiding your scar and your past to claim the fortune. Charlotte's lips tighten, but she doesn't deny it. Miss Marple continues, piecing together the plan. Charlotte, aware of Scherz's blackmail, placed the Gazette announcement herself, hiring him to stage a mock attack. She ensured a crowd would witness it, creating chaos to mask her true intent to kill Scherz before he could expose her. The blackout, she explains, was Patrick's doing, as he'd agreed to help Charlotte for a cut of the fortune unaware. She planned to double-cross him. The second shot, the one that killed Scherz, came from a hidden revolver fired by Charlotte in the dark. Her grazed ear was a deliberate misdirection, a wound she inflicted on herself to play the victim. The room is silent, save for Dora's muffled sobs. Patrick, his face flushed, protests, "I didn't know she'd kill him." Julia grips his arm, her eyes blazing. "You used us, Charlotte," she says, her voice low. "You knew we were Pip and Emma, and you wanted us blamed." Charlotte's love is brittle, almost unhinged. You wanted the money, she snaps. You'd have done worse. Miss Marple raises a hand, her voice cutting through the tension. But it didn't end with "Shers," did it? She turns to Dora, whose tears stop abruptly. You knew Charlotte's secret all along, didn't you, dear? And you've been frightened ever since. Dora's eyes widen and she nods, her voice barely a whisper. She made me promise, but after Rudy, I was scared she'd. Her words trail off, and Miss Marple's heart aches for the loyal friend caught in a deadly web. Suddenly, a clatter comes from the kitchen. Mitzi screams and Craddock rushes toward the sound, followed by Patrick. Miss Marple, sensing danger, moves swiftly despite her age, her instincts sharp. In the kitchen, Mitzi is backed against the wall, pointing at a bottle of sherry on the counter. Poison. She cries. I saw her, Miss Blacklock, she put something in it. Charlotte rises, her face a mask of fury. Lies, she shouts, but her voice cracks. Craddock examines the bottle, his expression grim. We'll test it, he says, signaling an officer to secure it. Miss Marple, watching Charlotte closely, sees the panic in her eyes. The sherry, she realizes, was meant for Dora, whose loose tongue had become a threat. She recalls a case in St. Mary Mead, where a poisoned drink hid a killer's desperation, and knows Charlotte's plan is unraveling. Craddock confronts Charlotte, his voice firm. Miss Blacklock, or should I say, Charlotte, we have the letter, the photograph, and now this. Did you plan to silence Dora next? Charlotte's defiance crumbles, and she slumps, her hands covering her face. I just wanted to live, she whispers. Letitia died, and I took her place. No one cared about Charlotte, with her ugly scar, her lonely life. The money was my chance. Her voice breaks, and Miss Marple feels a pang of pity, but not enough to blur the truth. Charlotte orchestrated Shers's death, manipulated Patrick, and nearly poisoned Dora to protect her stolen identity. The Gazette announcement was a gambit, a bold move to control the narrative, but it backfired, drawing Miss Marple's keen-eyed daughters. Craddock prepares to arrest Charlotte. She makes a sudden move toward the door, but Philippa, stepping forward, blocks her path. Enough, Philippa says quietly, her strength surprising everyone. The police take Charlotte into custody, her eyes hollow as she's led away. Dora, trembling, clings to Miss Marple, who pats her hand gently. Patrick and Julia, their roles as Pip and Emma confirmed, face their own reckoning for their part in the scheme, though their intent was greed, not murder. Mitzi, shaken but safe, vows to leave Little Paddocks, while Philippa, her mystery solved, as a mere bystander with her own quiet sorrows, offers Miss Marple a small smile. The house, once a stage for deception, feels empty now, its secrets laid bare. Back at the vicarage, Miss Marple sits with Mrs. Harmon, recounting the case over tea. Human nature, she says, is so predictable, yet so complex. Charlotte wanted a new life, but she built it on lies. The village will recover, she knows, but the scars of this mystery will linger. Craddock, stopping by, thanks her, admitting her insight cracked the case. You see what we miss, he says, and Miss Marple smiles, her needles clicking once. More. The truth is out, the killer caught. But she knows chipping Cleghorn will never be quite the same. And there you have it, the mystery of Little Paddocks solved. But at what cost? Miss Marple's sharp mind unraveled a web of deceit, saving lives and exposing a truth that shook the village. What did you think of Charlotte's desperate plan? Could you have spotted the clues? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know if you want more mysteries like this. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to stay with us for more thrilling tales. Thank you for joining us in Chipping Cleghorn. Until the next mystery, stay curious and stay sharp.